our second in a series of our social value speaker series, which is all aimed at untangling social value. As I mentioned at the beginning of our last session, social value is becoming more and more prominent as a term and as a concept and as something that not just businesses, but every sector in our society is becoming much more interested in social value, what it means and what it can bring to them and what they need to do. And we have launched this series in an attempt to try and cut through some of the terminology, demystify some of what social value is about, and bring some real life examples and guidance to you folks. As you know, I'm from Business in the Community. My name is Lisa. I'm the Deputy MD here, and increasingly I'm talking to our members and non-members about social value. And without wanting to oversimplify it, for us, social value is responsible business through a different lens. It's about organizations thinking beyond the bottom line and thinking about the positive impact that they can have on their employees, on the environment, on the local economy and beyond. And for us, that's all what social or what responsible business is. So today we're going to hear from a number of speakers, and I'm going to hand over to Greta, who's going to take you through the agenda.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks everyone else for joining us today. So we had a really good foundation around what social value is and why it is important last week. We heard from Esther Barnes from the Strategic Investment Board and Janet Cusker from the Belfast City Council. This week, we will hear again from both the SIB and the BCC, but we will be looking at what resources are available for application. So we're going to be taking the learnings from last week and learning about what resources are available for this, but we're also going to be hearing from Jude McVitie at version 1 around their experience of social value applications. Unfortunately, Jude couldn't join us today, but she has kindly recorded a video of her slides, so we will still be hearing about her and her fantastic insights into an application. We will then again hear from Lisa around what BITC can offer, and then we will have time at the end for question and answer. So if anyone else was here also last week and we didn't get the chance to ask any questions, we will have the time later today for them. So again, this is just a speaker series, so this is the second of a 3-part. The first part was around social value and why it is important. In this webinar, it has been recorded and the slides have been shared. If you weren't at this webinar but would like to still see this, please just send me an email. My email is in the invite, but also at the end of these slides. And then the next week, we will be hearing from Atkins Realis around what happens next, what next steps, and how does reporting work, which is really exciting for next week. So now I'm going to pass over to Andrea, and we're going to be hearing about the SIB's learning resources.
Thanks, Greta. Good morning, everyone. As Greta said, my name is Andrea McLean. I am the Social Value Advisor for IT contracts, and I am going to talk to you a bit around some tips for completing your social value returns and then signpost to resources that can help you that are all on our website. So can I just check, first of all, that everyone can see full slides okay? Perfect. So last week, Esther had went through what the policy landscape is for social value and what the two approaches are under the social value model. So you all know that we have the points approach and we have the alternative approach. And I suppose I just wanted to start by really emphasizing that both of those approaches are evaluating tenders' qualitative responses to the award criteria. So it is all around the how, it's all around your methodology. And in terms of your tender responses, the panel members will be assessing and scoring the quality of the social value response at evaluation stage in exactly the same way as they would do for any other elements of the quality criteria. So just to reiterate from last week's session, when you are completing your social value responses, you are submitting a written methodology response, and I'll talk briefly about that in a moment. And if you are bidding for something that is using the points approach, you will be also submitting that Excel spreadsheet that Esther had went through, which is the social value delivery plan. And really, in terms of how those responses are then evaluated. The panel members use a scoring matrix to score the quality of that response, and that matrix will be set out in detail within the procurement document. So always pay very close attention to that. That methodology then, so like I said, it's qualitative. It's very much is about the how, and I've put on the slide there the model criteria that is used, and it is very, very similar for both the points approach and for the alternative approach. So when you're thinking about the how, it's about giving as much detail as possible, really making clear how you're going to be delivering the social value requirements that have been set out within the procurement document. So everything from the timescales, for each social value initiative, quantifiable metrics, and that's so important. So with the points approach, you are submitting that social value delivery plan, but if you're bidding for something that's using the alternative approach, you're not submitting that Excel spreadsheet. So your methodology has to incorporate those quantifiable metrics. So how many jobs you're going to create, how many work placements, how many hours of training or support, or whatever social value initiative you have selected to deliver. You'll be setting out the resources that you're going to be using to plan and deliver, and then the activities that you're going to undertake. So it's not enough to say you're going to deliver job opportunities. Well, what does that actually consist of, from how you're scoping out those jobs, throughout the roles that you're going to provide, the training and the support that those people are going to be getting. Similarly for, say, if it's digital inclusion activities, well, what does that actually consist of, and who are you delivering it to? Another element of the methodology is around how you're actually going to be engaging with these key stakeholders, and that will vary depending on the social value initiative that you selected. But for example, it is, stakeholders like the social value beneficiaries, i.e. the people that are getting the jobs or the work placements or the skills training, organisations within the third sector, and also, of course, the contracting authority. Confirmation around that additionality, and I'll talk about that a moment whenever I'm going through some tips. And then lastly, how you will be monitoring and reporting and addressing any performance issues. So that is the model criteria, very similar for points and alternative, but the main difference is that for points, it's that Excel delivery plan that you're submitting. But of course, always read the tender documents really careful, as everything I've went through it is model, and the contracting authorities will be tailoring it for each contract that they're going out to the market with. So in terms of some tips then, there's a lot of information already on our website, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But to start off with a very basic one, understand what is required of you. And at the basic level, that is everything from correct format, font size, page limits, and all of that is a compliance issue, and that's going to be all set out clearly within the tender document. But it's paying really close attention to what the award criteria is, what's the schedule, because the schedule is where we're going to set out in detail what the eligibility requirements are for each of the social value requirements, and that scoring matrix. Be so familiar, what do you actually need to put in order to score the maximum marks. And also things like, well, has the client put in anything around minimum requirements? Have they put in caps against certain initiatives? Have they selected priority groups? So these documents will set out very clearly what is required of you, and always check the clarification responses as well. And if you're not sure of anything, ask a clarification question before the deadline closes. So it's so important not to presume that you know what the contracting authority wants to hear. So instead, really take the time to digest the demands of the question and respond accordingly. So for example, don't get caught up writing about adding value through recycling and reusing resources if the question's actually asking about social value in terms of additional employment or work experience opportunities. Do your research as well. So obviously within the tender documents, it'll set out some of the policy context and the strategic documents that are relevant for each contracting authority. But many public sector bodies also publish on their website, they'll have business or strategic plans, and within those they will set out their specific social, economic and environmental agendas. And these will be referenced as part of the tender documents. On our website as well, you will find a whole range of very useful resources, and you'll also find the Find a Broker database, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But essentially, use that when you're compiling your responses, as that will contain details of organizations that you can potentially partner with to deliver your social value. Be specific. Whenever I was talking about that methodology, it very much asks for those specifics around the timescales, the commitments, particularly around, well, how many jobs or work placements or hours of support, or if you're developing an environmental action plan for the contract or a health and well-being action plan. Be as specific and measurable as possible, particularly around objectives and targets and timescales, and who's going to be responsible for overseeing the delivery of the social value requirements as well. Relevant is key, and this goes without saying across all of the award criteria, but really make sure that your response is specific to the subject matter of the contract and what the buyer is actually looking for in terms of their priorities. So any benefits that you're identifying in your social value responses must be over and above the core deliverables of the tender of the contract. And that ties in with the additionality as well. And you'll see that as part of the model award criteria. But be very clear that the social value that you attribute to each contract needs to be generated by that contract. So, for example, you can't claim social value for 8 apprentices if only 4 of them are actually going to be working on that project. So you have to really be careful that you're ensuring that your social value initiatives are relevant to the actual contract that you are bidding for. It's not about general corporate social responsibilities. And then finally, be realistic. Only make commitments that you can deliver, because suppliers will be required to adhere. It's a contractual obligation. It's part of the award criteria. So you will be tied to what you put within your methodologies. And with points, as Esther said last week, that's a menu of things to choose from. So you have that flexibility. And with the alternative approach, you're putting forward your own initiatives that are relevant for that particular indicator. So be realistic when you're comprising those responses. Just in terms of some resources then, so I mentioned around this Find a Broker, it's a database that you will find on our website, and essentially social value works best when it is done collaboratively, and some of the best examples are where private sector companies are working collaboratively with third sector organisations. And we use this term brokers, and brokers are essentially organisations in Northern Ireland who can either benefit from the social value initiatives that public sector suppliers deliver. So, for example, it could be a supply chain opportunity that's going to be provided to a social enterprise. Or we also have brokers that work with people who can benefit from the social value initiative. So, for example, they might work with people who have an offending history or people with disabilities, and they can put those people forward for employment opportunities on the actual contract. On our website, you'll see a link there to it. This brokerage database, at the moment, we have over 180 organisations that are registered predominantly within the third sector, and they have all signed up to help suppliers deliver against their social value requirements. You can filter the database by a particular initiative, so you might just choose jobs or you might just choose work placements. You can also do it by priority group, by industry, and by location. And we have many examples of where brokers are working in collaboration with suppliers. And I should say as well that a lot of the brokers can also develop or deliver initiatives across a number of the themes that Esther had covered last week. So just to kind of give you a very quick flavour, we have suppliers that have worked with brokers through employment opportunities, and the social enterprises in those examples have put forward a range of potential candidates for interview. They've supported those candidates through the interview process, and then once a candidate has been appointed an actual employment opportunity, that social enterprise in many cases then goes on to continue to support that participant throughout their employment with the supplier. And also things like skills development. We've had many examples where a supplier has approached a social enterprise, maybe around getting a cohort together, and the suppliers delivered things like digital skills training or CV writing or interview techniques as well. I've mentioned the supply chain opportunities as well. And then the third element is the knowledge transfer. This is quite a popular initiative where private sector companies have essentially delivered pro bono advice to a range of different social enterprises on areas related to the contract. So we've had suppliers work with social enterprises around apps development, around cybersecurity advice, etc. And it all comes back to each of the initiatives have to be relevant to the subject matter of the contract, but brokerage database is definitely one very useful resource. Another one is the current contracts list. So each contract that has social value on it, we add it to a database on our website, and that essentially allows the brokers to view the opportunities and I suppose to get ahead of the game, to reach out to the contractors and say, I see that you have been awarded a social value, a contract with social value initiatives on it. This is the type of support that we can deliver to your organization. So that's really useful. And I suppose for suppliers that are already on the call, that already have contracts, I would very much advise you to keep your information as up to date as possible, and definitely encourage you to put forward a specific person rather than using a generic company address. It just makes that relationship a lot more beneficial to the broker. On our website as well, there is a supplier section that has a webinar that goes into a lot of detail on both of the two approaches and would be really useful as you're going through completing your methodologies to have a closer look at that. There's also a range of different resources around how to engage with brokers, how to develop ethical supply chain responses, environmental responses, etc. And that's something that we continually add to, so definitely keep an eye on that. We tend to run quarterly supplier information sessions, and our next one's scheduled for the 6th of February, and there'll be more information on our newsletter. So on the website, you can click to sign up to the newsletter, and that's where we put in things like case studies, events, and general information around the social value approach. I've already mentioned the broker database and also the contracts database as well, are two very useful resources, but that's very much a snapshot of the resources that we have available. And again, like I said, it's something that we kind of continually add to, and that kind of ongoing engagement piece through our quarterly information sessions as well. But if you have any questions, I'm very happy to take them at the end of the session.
Fabulous. Thanks, Andrea. Very informative. And we're going to head through Janet with the BCC perspective.
Bear with me. So is that shared? Great, thank you. So good morning, everybody. My name is Janet McCusker. I work in the Economic Development Unit in Belfast City Council, and this morning I'm going to take you through some of our resources and support programmes that we have around tendering generally, which will include social value, and also them of some of our own social value specific support as well. I will say at the beginning, essentially everything Andrea said applies to the social value approach that Belfast City Council takes as well. We actively encourage the use of the brokerage service, and we do that through SIB's resources, and everything she covered around methodology also is incredibly similar to how we would go through that as well. So I haven't repeated all of that, but I think that it's important to say that it applies. In terms of this morning, this happens to me every time I go to speak. There we go. I'm going to speak a wee bit about our kind of general procurement resources, our social value specific ones, and then around some of our programs as well. In terms of our kind of general procurement resources, our website has a tendering section where you can go and find out all about our tender, our processes. It lists our current tender opportunities and our upcoming tender opportunities, and those are published generally 18 months in advance. So if you're thinking about tendering for something, you can have a look there, and it kind of gives you time to get your ducks in a row. Additionally, one thing just to mention in terms of variance from the kind of SIB approach and central government departments approach is the council uses a system called e-sourcing, so not e-tendering, just similar enough to be confusing. Our site, they're not particularly user friendly, I will say that, but there are support guides available, and I've linked those for you to go in and have a look through it. Again, this is how you actually make the response around your social values, so it's good to be aware of the system and registered with it. In case something comes up, then you're good to go to be able to kind of return your bid. In terms of support for all bidders, we have tender support for all businesses that are looking to grow or to tender. This is free mentoring. There is eligibility around it, which is listed there. And within that, this is actually open whether if you're accessing any public or private sector procurement opportunities in Northern Ireland. So again, this could support you through either a central government department bidding process or a council bidding process. And this, you can also use your mentoring hours to support you with a live bid because it's offered independently of council support. So it's just something to be aware of, and they will also give you advice on support around the social value element. In terms of the council's social value procurement policy, we have supplier guidance, which is published on our website. It's quite new, so it's going through a process of being refined, but within it, you essentially will get information around our key deliverables, our policy, what the social value toolkit looks like, which I covered all last week. But you'll also get information around kind of how council will score that, how they'll evaluate it, including guidance on what is acceptable, because obviously council has slight nuance compared to the SIB approach, where we will look if something is an acceptable kind of bid within that. And it'll also highlight maximum and minimum thresholds and caps, and it links to each theme around what initiatives we would like to see or we expect to see coming forward. And also all in there will be around kind of how it's managed and monitored as well. We do have supplier resources available in that document, and they're linked to the key themes or deliverables of the policy. So, for example, the employability and skills theme, we have an employability and skills team in council, which will provide support and guidance around how to deliver opportunities. We also have initiatives that we can support you with and run to kind of help you access the inclusive growth cohorts, and also to link in with youth initiatives across the city. And we also help to support that supply side chain or supply side initiatives as well through the likes of a Meet the Buyer event. That is also open to people who are doing central government department contracts that will be delivered in Belfast as well. So it's an open kind of offer of support. We also have the likes of our enterprise business growth team who run a social enterprise public directory. So that's a way of identifying VCSE sector organisations, and particularly social enterprises and cooperatives that are operating in the city and in the wider region as well, which may be a way of helping you to, again, to access those in your supply chain, which is part of your social value response. And then there is also environmental supports and signposting, and also a lot of links to resources around understanding what those terms mean in terms of environmental. So what reducing carbon is, circular economy, those types of terms that are bandied about but aren't always understood. I think sometimes when you're going to write your social value bid. In terms of additional support, we are also offering a sort of an annual capacity building series of events. We have done a number of these this year. Our last one to deliver before the end of the calendar year is we have a Meet the Broker networking event, which is really for businesses to come and meet the VCSE sector, so voluntary community and social enterprise organisations who can help you to deliver your social value, and also can help you to deliver your corporate social responsibility, even though that's a slightly different entity, but it's sort of worth seeing as well. That's on the 19th of December in City Hall, and if if you want to register, the link will be sent out. In terms of 2024 programme, we are looking at doing sort of a knowledge transfer session around environmental aspects of social value, so looking at reducing carbon and the circular economy. And then we're also looking to do a session around disability. Obviously, it's a focus to work with people who are who have disabilities across kind of policies, and we want to look at focusing on kind of building those connections to the disability sector, looking at what good looks like in terms of working with people with disabilities, and also an education piece around how that actually works practically, how to support reasonable adjustments. So those are the sessions that will be upcoming, and we will send out all of that information when we know more about it. In terms of other programmes and supports, we also have across the region a new programme called Go Succeed, which is essentially our new business advice services. It's run by all of the councils, and it will support not only just starting out companies, but also companies that are growing or scaling up. And within that enabling growth strand of Go Succeed, there is support there that will help you to look at tendering and to look at planning for tendering, and also to put in essentially the governance that you will need to get through a tendering process. And within that, that also supports you with the things that you will need as mandatory requirements for social value. So that's actually a huge programme. There's places for 6,000 companies across Northern Ireland yearly, and that will be delivered as workshops, peer networking groups and specialist mentoring. And for a certain number of companies, if they're looking to be accelerated, essentially scaling, which is essentially accelerated growth. There is additional supports there as well, particularly around looking at procurement. So that's open again across not just council contracts, but for those looking to go for central government contracts as well. And then I think this links to what Lisa talked about very nicely at the very beginning of this, which is around that kind of more the idea that social value captures the kind of the work that's going on already around good business practices. Belfast has a new initiative called the Belfast Business Promise, which is around capturing the work that's going on and that good business practice that's already in the city. And I am going to let it speak for itself.
Sorry, Janet, is there supposed to be audio on this?
Oh,
Just have to share your screen with the audio.
sorry, it should. Obviously, it should be doing that, but it's not. So bear with me for 1 wee second. It was all going too smoothly. Do you know what? In fact, I'm going to go for my time. So I'll just give you the general gist of my video, and you hopefully will see it somewhere. Essentially, the business promise is around capturing good business practice. And within that, there are 8 pledges. You can be a supporter, so you can if you fulfill 5 of them, you then become a member. If you have 6 or 7 of them, and then when you do all 8, you become an ambassador. But within these, they're not just asks of businesses, there are support streams that sit behind this. So that will allow people to access a number of supports around social value as well. And obviously we went back to the start of my slides. So if we just bear with me, sorry about this. I shouldn't have put a video in. I should have known my capabilities are not at that level. But I think what's worth mentioning here is that across the 8 pledges that are cross-cutting for social value, and because there is supports within them, it's worth, if you're a company that's already doing some of these, or if you have aspirations to fulfill these pledges as well, that's a mechanism that you can access additional support and also get accredited through the business promise, which helps you to kind of have these things in place we're going forward for bidding as well. So that's me. Technical issues aside, again, I will take questions at the end as well. So hopefully that's been helpful.
Thanks, Janet. I'm just going to be sharing now Jude's presentation. So Jude is a member of Business in the Community, and they have been doing work with social value for a long time and doing fantastic work. So she's just going to sharing a few notes around tips on how to do it well.
So hello, I'll introduce myself first and then I'll get my slides up. Thanks for having me. My name is Jude McVitie and I'm the Social Value Manager at Version 1. I've been here a couple of years, since April 2021, and my background is actually in the communities, primarily community arts. So I've worked in loads and loads of different places and with loads and loads of different people in Northern Ireland, just delivering workshops. That was my background coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and get my slides on the screen. Give me 2 seconds. So I am here today, as I'm sure you all know, to talk about social value in tenders, and I had to resist putting the 5 stages of the tender process underneath, because I do experience certain levels of grief as I go through them, and certain levels of elation, depending. So we'll get stuck in. So I'd say there's 3 really major elements in a social value tender in Northern Ireland. So we're going to look at those and just have a look at some examples. We're going to look at the themes that are in the tender and some solutions that you can offer. And we're going to look very briefly at how to work in the community in Northern Ireland and build great partnerships. So the social value, the guidance lives in a schedule. So I've got a link there. It's for construction, but what you'll find is there's a lot of repetition. It'll just be tailored to each industry. Sometimes, you know, the wording of a little bit. I'll show you the example. And this will have a different number in every tender. So if you're familiar with the process, you'll know you get a number of schedules in a tender. And social value, unfortunately, does not have a consistent number. It's usually towards the end, one of the last. Sometimes it's 11, I've had a 35, depending on just how big those schedules are in the contract. It is almost exactly the same every time, and that can lull you into a false sense of security, but there's information in there that is unique. So you do need to go in and look at it. Like, the themes will change. In particular, they'll talk about the client's priority group. Often the only place you can find literally who those people are. Like, is it people living with a disability? Is it women returning into the industry after a caring break? You'll only find that information hidden in the tiny wording of the schedule. So every time you just got to read the whole thing, make sure that it's what you're expecting and that your proposition is going to be aligned. So I've got one open here. As I say, it's from the construction industry. So it will have, basically, this is a model question. So this is the guidance for somebody who's writing one of these, but it'll use this wording, and you'll see here's where they can add their extra information. Explains the system, you know, 100 social value points for every million, up to 330 million a year. I think it is. It's 300 anyway, 300 a year. Sorry, 3 million that would be. And yeah, it's like, this is the wording of the question. Everything's in there, everything you need. And I'll just show you how this can be a wee bit more tailored. So for example, if you see these themes up here. So often a customer will pick 1, 2, 3 of the themes. I have never seen one that's all 5. And what you'll notice is that they'll end up aligned to the industry. So a great example would be here. financial donations to support people in Northern Ireland who face barriers to employment to gain recognised construction-related qualifications. So if this was a contract for an IT company, it would probably just say, you know, gain recognised industry qualifications, because that's the wording that we would use for things like certifications and degrees, stuff like that. And a lovely one in here that if I ever work in construction, I'm looking forward to getting my teeth into, is for example, now the climate ones for construction are quite specific and they would be different for different industries, but there's one that you'd find allocation of a percentage of the budget to artwork or cultural activities. I have never seen that in an IT services contract, nor would I expect to. It wouldn't really make sense. But in construction, it makes a lot of sense. So you'll find it'll be very tailored to the, well, slightly tailored to the industry that you're working in and that you're responding to the tender for. So let me see, I'm just going to get to the right slide again. So the next part is the delivery plan. So it lives in the appendices. It's a big spreadsheet, basically, and you fill it in. Again, I've got a little sample to show you. So it's going to guide you. It's another place that you can find those themes and priorities. So sometimes they're easy to find in the schedule. Sometimes they're nicely laid out in the delivery plan. So we'll open this one up and this will just give you a download link. So whenever you get this deck, and again, these are samples. So they're not tailored yet. They're ready for your customer when they get to them to tailor. So they've got like everything in. But you'll see. Cancel that. So they'll give you examples here of things that you can offer. So you've got your declaration over here. You've got to fill that in, who that is, who's going to be responsible. Normally this page isn't here, okay? That's not in the ones that I would get, but it does show you, you know, some of the things that you can offer. And you can scroll up. I would really urge you just to download this and have a good read. Because it's a very useful document and it explains so you can see how many social value points you get for each initiative. Like I say, this page wouldn't normally be in the plan. This information would live in the schedule. And then you can also, you know, use this to say, so paid employment is a really, really high hitter. So say, for example, you can employ a young person recently out of education or a woman returning to work. Those were two examples I used earlier. Then if you stick in 52 weeks, you're going to get 150 points. I mean, that's half the annual allowance total for any contract. So they're a really, really heavy hitter. Then you've got these like opportunities for skills, placements, and you'll see there's your client's priority group. So that's where you go into the schedule and make sure you know, is it care leavers? Sometimes they'll call out specific. So people with a disability are called out in the original wording of all this. So it's a big priority for the Northern Irish government. We would do quite a lot of work there. And yeah, people who are considered to be at risk, disadvantaged in the labour market, that's a bit more open, but you'll get less points. It's all there for you. And what you do is you just fill that in and it's going to add that up and make sure that your points at the bottom add up to what you need for the contract. The other element is the question itself. So look, the wording of the question will be in the schedule. It will almost always also be in your template that you need to fill in. It'll be in different places in the tender. They're very, very variable. So the wording is almost always exactly the same, but the word counts can be extremely different. So I've had one of 1,500 and I've had one that had no word limit and we put in 18 pages. Look, I'm not going to go mad deep in this because we're quite competitive. I'm not going to give away all our methods and the things that our bid managers do to get us our full marks because they're amazing at it. But I will say some general advice is you need to be going deep into all those three elements, get them working together to get the best response. Everything should refer to each other. It should all be incorporating those priorities and all the usual best practice for bid writing. You're going to be looking at that customer as well. these things are very, very complex. There's a lot of information that they want to go into them. A lot of the time, there's not a load of understanding in the organization of what needs to go in there. So you're going to need more than one person working on this with you. It needs to be a bit of a team effort. Even you need somebody to be reviewing this who's had a chance to read the schedule, who's bringing it all together. And it can feel really competitive and confusing, but after a few goes, it starts making sense. So the customer puts the headings in for you, just like fill in the blanks as best as you can and keep going and just reiterate, keep going around, keep going around, get help. So the kind of themes that are out there. So look, this is a heavy hitter for my industry with good reason, because the biggest thing that we have to offer is secure employment and skills. We are the skills people. We're the people at the edge of the skills gap in our industry. We're one of the fastest growing industries in the world. Therefore, we have jobs and skills. So as I say, job opportunities are a really heavy hitter. They're a great way to deliver social value because you're genuinely making a massive difference in people's lives by creating these early careers opportunities. And they also spend lots of your social value points, making it easier for you to deliver a nice lower cost program, because these jobs would exist anyway. Training. So there's skills programs. So a big part of what we're doing is going out into communities and working with students. As I say, we do a lot of work with people living with a disability, just sharing skills, digital skills, employability skills. But that can also be often internal. So you can provide internal training. You can look at people within your organization in this contract team who are maybe living with a disability, who need additional training, who are in some way reflective of one of those priority groups that you find in the schedule that you can train. So it can be internal or it can be going out into communities, and there's a discrete difference you'll see in the little plans. And yeah, by focusing on the priority groups. So by focusing on the priority groups, you get more points for the same work, but it is more work to focus on the priority groups. You need to think a little harder and work a little harder in the coordination. So you get more points, but that's for a reason. And when you're looking at ethical and resilient supply chains, now I don't see this coming up very often in my industry, but what you want to be able to talk about is proven methods to check compliance. So you'll be able to say, we're doing this, but you'll have good methodology within your organization to prove that and show that, so that you can share that with the customer, so that you can say, this is what we're going to do with these, X number of hours training, we know what we're going to do with it. And always inclusion of small to medium enterprise, micro enterprise, and voluntary and community and social enterprise. So if you can find a way to get a social enterprise, a voluntary organization into your supply chain, that's a really, really good way to spend social value points. You're going to be doing loads of good locally. There's some great organizations. And then looking at zero carbon, again, doesn't come up loads in my industry. So there's waste reduction. There's tons of waste. For my industry, it's usually tech, like electronic, hard to recycle. And then you can also offer environmental awareness initiatives. You can be raising awareness of the environment within your team, making sure everybody's doing what they can to lower carbon. And then in well-being, it's kind of all about initiatives and opening that up to your supply chain and your customers. All of these also have strategies. So often you'll see in the social value plan that you can have like a fair work strategy worth 30 points and an annual update worth 10 points. So that's, 10% of the maximum points for the first year. It's actually a reasonably heavy hitter. And that's just tailored specifically to the contract team that you're working with. It's for your team to make sure that they're getting what they need to get ahead. So the last thing I'm going to talk about today is if you win. So look, you're going to need a network. You're going to need to work with local organizations, be them very small suppliers. In an ideal world, you want a small supplier doing your recycling, maybe giving them some skills, that kind of thing. You want to build some partnerships. You need to grow your network. There's brokers available on the BiSocial website. There's network and business in the community, and I'm sure we'll be able to help you out with some VCSEs. There's also just looking for organizations who are aligned to your personal and your organizational ethos. This is an opportunity for you to do fun things. And by fun, I mean spend some of your goodwill on this. Go and find somebody who you want to support and therefore authentically support them with the social value you had to deliver anyway. I see it as an opportunity to do cool things. I'm very lucky that I have my full-time job to concentrate on it. And when you find someone that you think you can work with well, find out what will help. Yes, you have X number of hours to deliver, but other than that, you've got a blank page. So it's a real opportunity to listen. So go and listen to people, find out what they need from your organization, and think of cool ways to work with them to deliver it. Always keep in mind to the people you're working with. So if you're offering money and you're buying a service, you're probably safe. But if you're going out there and you're offering skills, or you're offering kind of careers talks and you're raising expectations, make sure you know what the next step is. Make sure you're considering these participants and their journey and who you are on their journey, and that you know that they're going to have a soft landing when the session's done. And that's a big part of the analyze and improve. So in order to make sure that you're doing this in a way that is good for the community, that is productive for the community, you need to be getting lots and lots of feedback. You need to be thinking about, again, where you are on that person's journey, and listening to the organization and making sure that you're hitting the right note to build them up without them getting knocked down later on. Because a lot of the time we're not talking straight into jobs, we're talking a stepping stone along the way. If you're in a position to offer jobs immediately to people, maybe at an MVQ level 3, that is amazing, and your approach can be a bit different, and that's what you can talk about with this organization. So work with your partners, really listen to them, and you will do this well, because they're the people who know best what they're doing. They're the social value experts. Well, sorry, they're not the social value experts. They're the experts in social impact. They've been doing it for years, and they can help you. So I want to thank you very much for listening to me. I hope you have a lovely rest of session, and I'll hopefully see you soon. Bye.
Fabulous. So we heard from Jude and her vast experience on social value. So we're going to head off to Lisa now. So Lisa, I'm going to just pass over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm aware that we want to leave some time at the end here for questions, because we've got the people in the know on the call, and we don't want to miss that opportunity. So I want to give you the headlines from a business and the community perspective, and then leave a few minutes at the end for questions. Just by way of recap, I know there are quite a few member organisations on the call here, but equally there are some non-members. So I want to just give a quick high level about business in the community and what we do. The reason that I want to do that is that there is a lot of alignment in the way that we can support businesses with what is being required from a social value perspective. So whenever we talk about delivering zero carbon or addressing employability, for instance, looking at well-being of employees and communities, that's what we do day to day. We call it responsible business. Back in the day, it used to be CSR. Some people still talk about CSR, but that's probably much older terminology. But we talk about responsible business. And really, it's about trying to show you the types of things that we do and how we can potentially assist, if relevant, for helping you complete some of the bids and tenders that you've seen examples of here today. So we've been operating in this space for over 30 years, and we're the only network for responsible business in the province, and we work with many organisations, just over 260 actually at the moment. We need to update that slightly, and collectively our members employ about 40% of the working population, or just over that. So if we can get some of these really highly impactful things happening inside those businesses, never mind the ripple effect beyond into the community, the impact that this can have on what it means to live and work here can actually be quite significant. And that's where we really do welcome this kind of press towards social value, because for some organisations, they're doing a lot of this stuff voluntarily. Others need to be nudged in the right direction, and things like social value requirements really help that. And ultimately, it helps us all get towards this goal of trying to make Northern Ireland a better place to live and work, which is what we all ultimately want to get to. We've a really active board and some organisations that you'll recognise on the right-hand side. And if you ever want to talk to a board member or a representative of the organisation or any of our members, give us a shout and we'll be happy to link you in and have a chat with them. Next slide, please, Greta. Thank you. So can you bump someone before that? Just thank you. So whenever we talk about responsible business, and you'll see this mapping across to the kind of key themes for social value, we talk about people, planet, and place. And then finally, purpose, where we say if an organization is being responsible and ultimately delivering social value, they are thinking about their impact on the environment, and that's planet. They are thinking about what they can do to try and minimize the negative environmental impacts, and even more importantly, enhance the positive environmental impacts that they're making. And place, we're thinking about how does an organization link with the communities in which it works? What does a community even mean to an organization? How do they classify that? And then how do they engage with that community in a way that makes sense for what the community needs, not just in the way that the business wants to. And then finally, people, that's where we're working with our organizations to think through how can you be responsible towards your current workforce, but also your future workforce. So in relation to your current workforce, how are you ensuring that you have diverse, inclusive and healthy workplaces? And then in relation to your future workforce, what are you doing to reach out to those people that are furthest removed from the workplace and trying to help them find their way back into the world of work in some shape or form? And the way that we work is that we have teams, and this is a bit of a high level explanation. It's too much time taken to get into the detail of how it really works, but broadly speaking, we have teams of people who are experts in each of those respective areas, and they're always scanning to see, right, what are the next big issues? What are the things that we should be talking to our member organizations about, helping them understand? And then importantly, and the bit that I'm very passionate about is the so what question. So we know that we want organizations to be more healthy and inclusive. So what are we going to do to support our businesses to do that? So these teams arrange a whole range of programs, initiatives, campaigns and information to help our member organizations better understand the issue and, most importantly, take action. So if we move on to the next set of slides, I want to just give you a sense of the types of things that we do. Now, bear in mind, to give you a sense, we have well over 50, 60 probably different interventions and programs under the 3 Ps, as we call them, of people, planet and place. I just want to pick up on a few examples of what we can do and how we help our organisations, and then think through how can you flex that to help that work for your social value requirements whenever it comes to some of these bids and tenders that we've talked about in this session and the previous session. So under people, we've talked quite a bit around employee wellbeing and inclusion, and that's a big priority for the people team at the moment. They do lots of different things, right through from helping you write wellbeing policies and think through what wellbeing should be, helping you identify what the wellbeing issues are for your own team and what you should do about that, through to helping provide bespoke advice and training on a whole range of wellbeing issues. From men's health, we have support for people that are working in an ageing workforce and how to go about looking at that. We have a lot of nutritional advice. We have education or exercise programs that are coming up for our businesses. So lots of different things that organizations can tap into there from a wellbeing perspective, and a lot around inclusivity as well. So helping you understand the breakdown of your organization, groups that you need to potentially reach out to and engage them better within your workforce, and how to go about doing that, whether that be from a race perspective right through to age inclusivity and everything in between. So they're a busy team, as you can imagine. On place, this is a number of different areas, and this is a bit, there's quite a lot of alignment from a social value perspective, and this is where we would pick up what we've talked about here around employability, but also about relationships with the VCSE sector and different collaborations within the community. So we have a whole range of education programs where we put volunteers from our businesses out into primary and post-primary schools to build relationships with education providers. But for about 20, 30 years, we have been brokering relationships between community organisations and businesses, whether that be organising practical volunteering challenges for member organisations where it can send out 15, 20 people to do a practical volunteering exercise, ideally around a theme that makes sense, could have a biodiversity angle, for example, But we also do a lot more skills-based volunteering where we match our business organisations' skills and expertise with community organisations that need it the most, whether that be on a bespoke project, for instance, helping them write a new marketing plan, or from more of a mentoring perspective, or potentially even going onto the board of a community or voluntary organisation. And that's the type of thing that we see cropping up quite a bit whenever it comes to social value requirements and where we think we can make an impact. And finally, on that also, just to talk about the employability piece, we have a number of programs that help our employers reach people that are furthest removed from the workplace and help upskill them and get them, pull them closer towards the workplace and help them move it back into the world of work. And a great relationship and network there of other employability organisations that we signpost lots of our members to. And then finally, and I will keep this very brief, but this is a biggie. Very busy team at the moment, our planet team, an environmental team. And what they do ultimately is help you understand where you are environmentally and where you need to go, and then help you to get there. They help you understand where you are in terms of your current emissions and help you create a plan to work towards net zero. And they do it in a very practical way. And if they want us to come in and do much more bespoke training and around that area, we can do that with your team. And they also do a huge amount of work around biodiversity and nature as well. And we have the only biodiversity certification that's available for businesses in the province at the moment. So a lot of work happening there.
Thanks, Lisa. Note that we're quite tight on time, so I won't be taking too much time with this, but we do also have more bespoke social value support. One's just around maximizing the existing membership for our members, and then also specifically around social value for procurement. So it's mapping out your existing activities, helping you define specific social impact that you want to approach, or even just sitting down with you and designing social value projects. So that's another aspect that BITC can help with. However, I now want to head off to question and answer. So I'm going to be opening up the floor to anyone who has a question or answer. Just do turn on your video or write a question in the chat. I will be sharing my screen, so I won't be seeing everyone, but it's open to the floor. So if no one will take a question off now, I will be reading a question from Helen Castelli-Burke from the chat. So how should a client approach a tender as VDP where the contract value does not materialize to be as high as the value stipulated at tender stage and as VDP target? For example, the client commits to a lower spend award. Do I want to pass over the question to Andrea, Esther, or Janet?
Yeah, so if I'm correct, so if the points approach is used at tender stage, then the number of points that are calculated post-award are basically based on invoiced value. So at tender stage, you are completing your methodology based on an indicative number of points. Once that contract gets awarded, it gets put on our monitoring system, and the updated value will be put there. So say, for example, if it's a contract where I suppose it's demand led, the number of points will be directly linked to the actual invoice value. So the money that the supplier is getting, as opposed to the indicative number of points that were used at bid stage. And that's why points works really well. So basically, if the value is a lot lower at delivery stage, the points will be calculated to reflect that.
Thanks, Andrea. And the second question was also around, is the social value points target lower for IT contracts being at 300? Would the other construction sectors have higher contracts? So Helen had said that there's almost 4,000 points over 3 years, which they would see as a challenge to deliver.
So do you want to talk about construction, and then I can just very briefly about IT?
Yeah, so at the moment there's no cap in construction contracts. So what we are doing is working very closely with the construction industry. The original points whenever we looked at them was based on the sort of the labour value within construction contracts. So if you look at construction build, for example, versus construction civils, there's actually a difference within the points calculations around the employment. And we've been working quite closely, as I said, with the Construction Employers Federation and a number of contractors to have a look at how we change that again. So there is a new model for construction, which is in consultation with the heads of procurement and the departments, which looks at how we do things like removing caps for how long people can count towards their social value. It's no longer, considering capping it at 52 weeks to allow contractors who are delivering big build contracts to deliver more points by employing the same amount of people. And it's sort of reflective of the fact that you also have a Northern Ireland based workforce whenever you're delivering in Northern Ireland a building or a civils project, whereas a lot of the issues around IT, which Andrew might touch on, is around where those contracts are actually being delivered, and the labour value within those contracts is vastly different because you have a lot of hardware, software, etc. So it's all sort of being worked out in that round, I suppose. But as I said, there is a new sort of calculation set of points going through that process of I suppose being approved at the moment, which reflects changes in the recent construction cost inflation, etc.
And just very briefly on that, the points approach was co-designed with IT industry, and it is exactly as Esther said. You could get a multi-million-pound IT contract, and everybody thinks this is very high value. But when you look at the labour content on those types of contracts, like a software development, they are quite low, and that's why we didn't want a £150 million contract to reflect, oh right, well that needs to generate into the exact number of points, because you need to bear in mind that it could be a very small team of people actually working on it, and so that's why there is a cap for IT.
Thanks, Andrea. And then there's one last question from Helen within her message. It's for when contracts are a shorter duration, for example, of 18 months, of a higher points value, maybe of 500 points. It can be challenging to put apprentices onto the contract by the social value DP, especially where the contract start date doesn't align with the college September intake. Is there a threshold on contract duration for deploying the alternative method?
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just, because this does tend to come up quite a bit in sort of term contracts and things with roads in particular, but it can happen across any of the sort of the contracting authorities, where you have huge contracts going out that are very short duration. Those are conversations that we're having with the contracting authorities. So the model as it sits at the moment was was never meant to be one size fits all. It was a starting point. It was so that everybody had the same language, the same expectations, etc. But we do encourage the contracting authorities to examine each of those on a case by case basis, because you will have some really high value contracts, even within construction, going out that are maybe delivered over a very short period, 4 or 5 months. Sometimes you have summer schemes that go on within roads, for example. So the contracting authority should really be looking at each contract and looking at doing that bit of pre-market engagement that we always sort of really encourage them to do with the suppliers, to say what is actually achievable under this, and if it's a case that you can't actually have apprentices, what are the other employment opportunities on this? It's not likely that you would be able to fill as many sort of with those priority groups, etc., that you would with apprentices. So in which case do we look at reducing the points or having a look at upping points in other areas? So it is tailorable, but there's no set threshold as such. It's always about the individual contract, because there are too many external factors for us to have a suite of thresholds that would apply to each contract. So what we have is a starting point, and the contracting authorities should really be looking at that and all of the factors around the deliverables of the contract when they're setting out their social value, both the target and what they're asking for under the initiatives.
Great, thank you, Esther. So I'm going to do one more call for questions. If there aren't any, we will be closing the call. So one more round, a few more seconds. Great. So we didn't have any questions. However, if anyone has any more for either the speakers or for BITC, do send me an email. We will be contacting everyone and then sending over a recording of the session today and the slides again. You should have received last week's as well. If you haven't, again, just let me know. And I hope to see everyone else next Tuesday for the final session with Atkins Realis. So big thank you to both the SIB and BCC. You guys have been fantastic. And also over to Jude at version 1 with her fabulous insights. So thank you all and have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
Greta.